Hello everyone and welcome to Don't Ignore the Elephant, the podcast where we talk about the stuff that no one else will, the elephant in the room. I'm Liz O'Riordan. I'm a breast cancer surgeon with breast cancer myself, and during my career I've had a lot of elephants to deal with. I've learned that talking about them, getting them out in the open can help you know that you're not alone. And it's wonderful that we're building a community of people who want to talk about their elephants. Keep sharing them with me, because together we can help each other. Whether it's cancer, grief, resilience or bullying, losing your identity, or simply how to get out of bed in the morning, there are loads of things that can be hard to discuss. I know how powerful it can be to hear someone else talk honestly about their own problems. I've carefully chosen my guests to help get these issues on the table. They've either experienced the elephant themselves or spent their life helping those of us who have them. I'm going to be asking the questions everyone else is too afraid to ask. This week, we're going to be talking about bowel cancer, survival, and hope. This week's guest is a remarkable woman. Natalie Woodward was diagnosed with metastatic bowel cancer at the age of 36, but after a full year of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, the cancer started to grow. In the middle of the pandemic, she literally had the mother of all operations to remove it. She had to learn to walk again, to dance again, to accept she would never have sex or use the toilet again. And yet, there is still hope, and I can't wait for you to hear her story. Welcome, Natalie, to Don't Ignore the Elephant.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's taken us a long time to get here, but I've finally got you on the podcast. So I thought I'd start by asking you what symptoms you had when you were diagnosed.
So I think in the beginning, they were very subtle. I guess what we would class as IBS symptoms, slight bloating when eating, occasionally feeling a bit sicky, but nothing major. I think that would have started about a year before diagnosis. And then I would say that got slightly worse until maybe 3 months before diagnosis, and I'd lost a lot of weight without trying. I was so tired all the time, so I think the extreme tiredness was a really, really big indicator that I actually never thought of it being cancer. I just, thought, I'm working really hard, I'm running around doing... So the tiredness was a big one for me. And then right towards the end, I had a really bad pain in my lower back. Nothing could touch it. No pain relief would touch it. It felt a little bit like sciatica to begin with, but the back pain got worse and worse, and then my bowel eventually stopped working altogether, so I wasn't able to go to the toilet. I was passing out of the toilet when I was trying to go. So I didn't get all of the symptoms. Like, I didn't have I think maybe a small bit of blood in my poo, but nothing really that worried me. So for me, it was the tiredness, the lower back pain. Yeah.
And you were young as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it never crossed my mind. Even when I was put on the 2-week referral pathway, I was just convinced it was going to be an IBD like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Yeah. I could see my insides on the screen in front of me. And even then, I just never crossed my mind that it would be cancer. And I wasn't aware of the symptoms, I guess, at that time. So when I put them into Google, which you should never do, I kind of felt a bit relieved. I was like, I think I've got ulcerative colitis. It sounds exactly like that. So and then I came face to face with my cancer on the screen. And it was very subtle to begin with. So this is why it doesn't have to be glaringly obvious symptoms. Just subtle changes in your body is really important to take notice of, because if only I'd really known when it had all started, we could have hoped, might have caught it a bit earlier, but it wasn't to be.
No. But I think it is that you lose weight when you're stressed, you feel tired. It's easy to put it down to the job. But I think if you know you're a bit tired and stressed and you do something about it and you're still not getting better, then you need to go and get it checked out.
That's exactly it. It's important not to catastrophize it, because it's still uncommon. It's the 1 in 2 statistic isn't 1 in 2 of us at our age, at the age of 36.
No.
So it's not to scaremonger. It's just, I always say, everyone I know who's had bowel cancer has had different symptoms. Some had none at all apart from the tiredness. Yeah. Some had a lump, some didn't. Like, so there's so many things it could be that I always just say, just get to know what's normal for you, because your changes might be completely different to mine.
Exactly. So you were diagnosed with bowel cancer, but it had spread at the time you were diagnosed, hadn't it?
Yeah, so it was locally advanced, and the lower back pain was actually my tumours growing back into my spine, into the spinal nerves.
Gosh.
And also something else, just a couple of months before, I was using a menstrual cup at the time. My periods actually stopped probably 2 months before diagnosis, but the period before that, I was using a menstrual cup and I couldn't get it in. And I was like, what is going on? So I examined myself and I felt this hard thing inside my vagina. And I actually Googled, can your vagina grow a bone? Like, I was so puzzled. What is this? And it was the tumour. I could feel it. It was like growing through my vaginal wall, kind of pushing it closed. So yeah, my tumours were pretty much everywhere in my pelvis, touching everything apart from my bladder, pretty much. It was growing into my butt, the inside piriformis, my pelvic side wall. The fact that it was touching all those things is why I had to, in the end, get all those things taken out.
Yeah. And that operation is called a pelvic extensuration.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen very often. And I've never seen it. In all my surgical training, I never saw it. It is a huge operation. Can you just tell us what the surgeons did to you?
So my operation was, I think, about 12 hours. And I was cut from above my belly button down to the pubic bone. And then from underneath, from the back of my vagina, all the way through my perineum up to my anus. So yeah, part of that I was prone, laying face down. And I had my ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, most of my vagina. So there's a small bit at the front that was left.
Yeah.
My rectum, anus, my left piriformis, my left pelvic side wall, my groin nodes. And also, by the time I had my surgery, the cancer had spread to my left ureter. I know you know what that is.
That's a tube that connects, the kidneys to the bladder. Yeah,
so it had spread to there. So they actually, it might have been easier for them to just remove my bladder, but I'm really grateful that they gave me the chance to keep it. So I had a left ureterectomy, how do you say it? I'm not sure. And then they reimplanted the healthy ureter back into my bladder, so that my bladder was operated on. It's actually on some clinic letter I've seen, it's classed as a neo bladder, and I have a neo vagina, which is where they've taken my right buttock, so they remove most of that, the glute, and they create what's called a flap. So it's basically to patch up everything they've taken underneath of you. So they have tried to they've created a neo vagina, but for me, it's not like functional. No. And it's really strange because that was probably the biggest shock for me, because when they said about creating a vagina, I just assumed it would be like the vagina I had before, and it's really not. They've done an amazing job, so I'm not, it's just obviously it's not. It's made of my bottom.
Yes.
So it's really, that was for me the biggest shock. I don't think I really realised what that was going to be like.
Did you still have a clitoris, or did they have to take that as well?
No, so I was really lucky. I kept the front, so from the front I look quite normal. So I kept my clitoris. Obviously with everything that's happened down there, the sensation is really different. So not just in that area, but my left side of my leg and stuff. So, they also had to take a section of my spine out as well. So my sacral spine. So I think I had 5 or 4 nerves removed. I do get weakness in my left leg, but I was really, really lucky because my surgeon came in after my operation a couple of days later and said, can you move your left foot? We had to take more away than we thought once we were in there. And I did. And he was like,
phew.
Because a lot of people I know who've had my surgery and had the spinal part of it, they have, is it foot drop or drop foot?
Yeah, the nerves don't work properly, so they can't lift, they can't pick their feet up.
Exactly that. So, yeah.
I'm listening to you and I know when I had breast cancer, and I had my breast removed, I had my ovaries removed. It's really hard to deal with that body image. And listening to everything you've had to deal with. You're never going to poo again. You can't have penetrative sex again the way you used to. You've lost your fertility. You had to learn to walk again. It is huge. And we don't hear a lot about this kind of surgery and how women live when they don't function like a normal person. It must have been really lonely and really scary when there are so few people out there who you can go to for advice and how to cope with it all.
Yeah, it really was. And at the time I had my surgery, I've actually connected with quite a few people, young people who've had the surgery now. But at the time, I only knew of one, and she became a very, very good friend of mine. Unfortunately, her cancer came back and she's passed away, but she became a very close friend of mine. And I definitely think seeing her a year ahead of me gave me the courage to go through with it, because there was a moment, I'd had a year of really grueling treatment, chemo, radiation at the same time. I had like
horrible.
29 days of radiation, and it was on my pelvis, so I had really bad burns inside my vagina, my anus, my everything, you know. It was really, really brutal. And I found chemo really hard. I remember looking at people going for a run on chemo thinking, how can you do that? Like, I don't know. I physically couldn't do anything.
No, there's chemo and there's chemo. Yeah, it's...
Oh my gosh, I was just like, I was really not great with chemo, but I think we did so well in that first year of treatment. My cancer responded so well. At the beginning, I was classed as incurable. Like, my initial team said that they wouldn't be able to cure it, but they would hopefully obviously shrink it, keep it under control.
Yeah.
So it went better than I expected in that first year. And then when it just grew straight back, it just started going straight back after I was off the first lot of treatment. And hearing about that surgery, there was a moment, which I do feel bad about now, but there was a moment where I thought, I don't think I want to live like that. And I said I was really upset, and probably the first time I cried with my consultant, because I was very just get on with it. And I just said to her, I wish you'd never saved me in the first place. And I was just devastated, and I feel really ungrateful for saying that now, because I don't feel like that. But it was really hard, really lonely. And at that time I was watching all my friends like having babies and moving on with their lives, and I've had this news, and I felt totally alone. Even though I have a really amazing family and friends, I just thought, what's my life going to be like? My quality of life, I think it's important to all of us. There's no point surviving if you can't really live. And I think that was a really big question, was what was my quality of life?
Yeah. You can't imagine what it's going to be like after you've had the treatment. And can you get back to it? I think a lot of us, even women deciding to have a mastectomy, my mum having to decide to have her arm removed. How can I possibly live without an arm? How can I possibly live and accept the fact that you can't have kids, you're infertile, you're in the menopause, you can't poo? It's massive. Time does help. And seeing others like you can help, no. But I think it's really important to say it's really huge, scary decisions that you have to make at that time.
It is, and actually a lot of people decide not to go through with it. And this is something that I have no judgment for them at all. I don't judge them for that. I understand. I completely understand. And it's really hard. And obviously for me, I wanted more life, and this was my only chance of that. So in the end, that moment of doubt was just a moment. I didn't sit in that place for very long. And definitely my friend Alex, who'd had the surgery, that really helped me. And obviously I went through my surgery in the pandemic, so I really was lonely. I didn't have anyone. So I think that's why it's important for me. Like, sometimes I wonder why, oh my gosh, do I want all these people to know about my vagina and anus being cut out? And then I just thought, well, do you know what? At the time when I needed someone, there wasn't really anyone talking about it. And luckily for me, I met Alex. She helped me through. I give her so much credit for giving me the strength to keep going through the really hard parts.
You can now help other people.
Exactly. And also for me, not to be ashamed of of what's happened. It's important that people don't sit in shame, because I did sit in shame for a really long time about what had happened to me. And I still have moments of that now. where I feel like a monster if I have to be examined, if I end up going to hospital and the team don't know me.
I remember when I was at medical school and you'd see a patient come in with a weird lump or a symptom that was really rare, and you'd rush to go and have a look because you might never get the chance to see it again. And then when you're the patient, you think, am I the freak show? Yes, come and have a look. I'll roll over and turn my legs. And it's that, oh my goodness, that's what she looks like down there. And it takes a lot of training to learn to just smile and just face completely blank. Okay, this is fine. This is normal. Inside you're going, oh my God, how does she live like that? How does she look like that?
Yeah.
We don't see your scars in the media. We don't see people who've had anal cancer or vaginal cancer on the cover of Time magazine. The big cancers often get too much because it's easy to put a picture of a woman in a pink pretty bra, but we don't hear about the harder side of it. The cancers that don't get a look in.
I think, I've had lots of chats about this lately because I feel like when you have a cancer, like a gynecological cancer or a bowel cancer or anything that's to do with like your bottom or poo or bowel, like even the word bowel, like these aren't marketable cancers.
No,
people don't want to hear about that. Like, and actually there's a lot of people going through it, and it's your private parts that brings with it shame already. And so
we're not good at talking about it in England, are we? You know, it's like, right, we can't say penis or vagina, we have to say something else. You know, it's crazy.
It is. And I think as well, like, you just want to see yourself represented. You just want to see someone else. And then there's so much power in that. There's so much power in seeing yourself and knowing you aren't a monster, and you might be anatomically a little bit different, but you're not a monster. And it's really important to have these conversations because we shouldn't hide away, and we shouldn't... I've had people contacting me through my social media asking to do collaborations because they think I'm a breast cancer patient.
Really?
And then I say I'm not. And they say, oh, you know, maybe another time.
Oh.
And that's fine. Like, but it's just goes to prove, like, my surgery, when you describe it, I'm not doing it. I'm not, like, making it sound worse for clout.
It is what it is.
It is what happened. And they are the parts that were removed. And it's too much for some people. But it's... what's really happening for a lot of people. Like, I've met so many young pelvic exenteration patients now, and we're growing a little family because the aftermath is so hard, and you do need those people that really understand it. Definitely.
And I think I'm going to go back to sex again. So I never talked to my breast cancer patients about sex because I was never trained and I didn't think they had issues with it. And I know I talk a lot about sex, and I feel guilty when there are people out there who physically cannot have sex again, penetrative sex, because of what they've been through. But I remember in season 1, I was talking to Sam Talk Sex, who's incredible. And I get cross when you see all the pretty bras. And what about people like me that have one breast? And it's like, what about pants for people who've got a colostomy? If you're dating and you have a stoma, what can you wear to hide it? We need to think about underwear for everybody.
Definitely. And I think, you know what, as well, it's really annoying. My mum's a breast cancer survivor. It's really annoying because it isn't glamorous. It's awful.
Yeah.
You're having your breast literally cut off your body. And I guess the word breast is more marketable. But I love that there's so much for breast cancer. I love it. And I hope that the same, like you say, like people who are like me, I kept my bladder, but I'm really incontinent. I have to self-catheterize because of the nerve damage to my bladder. And I obviously, I don't even know if I've got a pelvic floor left after that surgery, but things like this. And I don't want to wear tenor lady.
No.
So there's so much scope to be more inclusive, and also to break down the shame about saying, I've had chemo radiation on my pelvis. I've got a dry and hard vagina now. Like, this is happening to a lot of people. We have to dilate our vaginas after pelvic rads.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about that and it's really a big deal. Like, a lot of people go through, even without having a vagina cut out, the after effects of pelvic radiation on your vagina is similar to menopause, I guess, where it's dry. These are big things as a young woman, or any age woman, to go through.
I know, it is. And if you're told, here's a pack of dilators and some lube, off you go. Like, really?
I was so horrified. So I came out of it was halfway through my radiation. I think I had 29 consecutive days. I was feeling pretty rough by this point, and this nurse brought me into the side room, and she literally had this little tub of various sized pink dilators and an NHS dildo, I call it. It was like this really, I was like, what is happening here? What am I doing?
This is the bonus bit.
But she was like, yeah, you kind of, it's really important that you have to do this. But I had no idea. I hadn't been told about it before, so this happened halfway through.
And that's awful. You see, we should tell people up front. I remember I used to do bowel surgery, and for a lot of men, when they have their rectum removed, you can damage the nerves. And I used to say you might get a retrograde ejaculation, so it goes inside, or you can't get an erection. But you wouldn't tell them how to fix it or what to do about it. They just need to know it might happen. But to not tell someone, oh my God, we've got a lot to learn, haven't we?
Yeah, I think I was talking the other day as well. So obviously with my operation, having essentially my sex organs cut out of my body, I don't know whether it was because of the pandemic, things were running a bit differently, but I didn't have any psychological preparation. And I think if you're going through transitioning, if you're transgender and you're transitioning, you will have psychological support before the operation.
Yes.
It's essential. You can't go through it without having that. But when it comes to cancer, it's like, well, obviously the most important thing is getting rid of the disease, but actually it's the same kind of thing. Like, you should be psychologically prepared. You can be told this is what's going to physically happen to you. This is what I'm going to do in the surgery. You don't understand what that means at the time, because you're like, obviously,
I've got
having
cancer.
all this.
You're still processing that. And there's
Yeah.
also the time pressure. We have to treat you within a month of diagnosis. You don't have the luxury of 6 months or a year of learning how you'll cope.
No.
It's just a massive wham. And I think people want information at different times. I may not be ready to hear the impact on my sex life right at that moment. But then 6 months later, you think, oh, hang on, I wish someone had told me, but I might not have taken it in. But it's giving people that choice to say, you do need this, we do need to warn you, or there is help available when you do find it's a problem. It's that aftercare that we just don't have the resources for at the minute.
And I think sometimes when you're making a decision when it comes to your cancer, like, you just want to live, essentially. Yeah. And sometimes I am glad I had the operation. I'm here. But at the time, I don't think you truly know what you're signing up for. Even though my team was so amazing, like, it couldn't have been clearer why they needed to take all of that out. They really went through it on my scans, and I really understood. But I don't think you know really what you're signing up for, because it's like an emotive thing, isn't it? You're making a decision because you want to live. And then you do live, which I'm so happy about. And then
Me too.
This is the hard part, the survivorship, and it's an honour. It's an honour to be a survivor.
But it's still bloody hard.
It is. It really is. And it's not linear either. I've had some really like peaks and troughs where I feel invincible and super proud of my body. And then I've had times where I felt so ashamed and like a monster, and I've, grieved not being a mother, and I'm watching all that, my friends.
That's why I don't do much on Facebook. When it's World Book Day and everyone's getting the costumes to put their kids in the book uniforms, or Mother's Day, I didn't know I wanted kids until I found out chemo made me infertile. And I don't think I'll ever grow out of that. And it's the stuff that people don't see, because you're a beautiful, attractive woman. No one would know what's going on inside your head, but the decisions were taken away from you. It wasn't your choice to not have kids.
That heartache as well is, it's so, obviously you know exactly what it feels like. And I think it's something that we will live with till our dying day. There will never be a day that I don't feel sad that I didn't have children before cancer. And I know having kids and cancer must be hideous, but I'd rather have known at least one day of being a mother, and
that look of a baby just looking at you and saying, I get it completely.
Yeah. And there's a lot of us, whatever cancer, I think the treatment, and again, we are warned about it. But at the time you think, well, it doesn't matter if I can have a baby because I just want to live.
You just say yes because you want to live. And then the consequences, so the long-term side effects of cancer treatment, the chronic pain, the constant hospital appointments, the anxiety, the depression. And when someone you know dies, social media can be really hard because it's everywhere. And it's like, God, I'm just losing friends. And that guilt that you're alive and they're not.
Yeah, so this is Bowel Cancer Awareness Month, and I have found it really hard. I'm taking a little step back from Instagram,
Good.
Just maybe a week or so, whatever. But because I made other stage 4 friends, over the last 4 years since I was diagnosed, I've been to so many funerals, it's unreal.
It's
and
horrible.
It never gets better. And I think of them every day. And when I'm having a bad day, that gets me out of bed. And they've changed my life. Like, they've changed who I am as a person. So I'm so blessed to know them. But it's really hard. And I'm finding that, Bowel Cancer Awareness Month really can be very triggering. And I'm finding it's to do with the friends I've lost on this occasion. It's not really about me. It's like, you can't help but
I get it.
Reflect on that.
No.
And the guilt.
The guilt. There's the guilt that they're dead and I'm not. And I want it to come back so no one else has to die. But also, and this is going to sound weird, I'm at their funeral imagining what mine will be like. You're almost getting an insight of how your family and friends will feel if I was to die young from cancer. And that's really hard to get your head around.
That's so true. I think I've pretty much, well, I can't talk for everyone, but I've definitely had that thought when just a brief moment, and it's really close to home, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, the guilt. I find myself, even my friends who are still alive, who will never get better from their disease, I'm always really aware of what I'm saying because I'm in a very privileged position. And whilst I do have a right to talk about the things that I find hard, I'm always really mindful that there are some people that would jump at the chance to have my surgery and aren't eligible to have it. So it's massive head fudge, isn't it? Like, it's
I know, but it's crazy that you're saying you feel privileged to have gone through everything you've gone through, whereas others can't, which brings me on to my next question. I want to talk about cancer poverty because cancer can be very expensive, and what you get depends on where you live, what your nearest hospital is, and whether you can afford to have private treatment. And I don't think this gets talked about a lot at all. What were your experiences of it?
So for me, we really struggled financially in the beginning. Well, even now really, but I was a teacher before cancer. I was a primary school teacher and a dance teacher, and I was a dancer before that. So at the time I was dance teaching, and it was a 0-hour contract. So I wasn't employed. It was like self-employment. Didn't have any life insurance or critical illness because I didn't own a home, which obviously is very normal in London because it's ridiculous. So I suddenly couldn't work, and I couldn't work before my treatment started because I was so ill. And I remember, I've been told I've got advanced cancer that's inoperable, and I remember laying awake at night worrying more about how I was going to pay my rent.
Yeah. I get that.
I think this is crazy. Like, this is, there's a lot of varying experiences. I'm very lucky that I live in London, and the care I've had has been unbelievable. My mum's had cancer in Devon, and my dad's actually got cancer, and he's in Devon as well.
I know.
Their care has been great, but I think it's made me realise how fortunate I am, like, to have the hospitals that we have here. St Mark's is like the National Bowel Hospital. That's where I had my operation, and they've just been absolutely incredible. It does break your heart when you hear of other people really having to fight for things or kind of getting written off when they get stage 4 cancer. There's a lot of people I know who've had to do GoFundMes to get private treatment. I think this side of things isn't talked about a lot. And there are a lot of people who share their stories who are private patients. And I think, good, that's really good. For one, because if you can take burden off the NHS, great. And also, if you've got private, why not use it? But I think that becomes really noticeable about the difference between private and NHS, what's available.
Yes.
Because a lot of my friends were seeing someone having X, Y, and Z treatment that had worked for them for 2 years, but they weren't able to get that because they were an NHS patient. And I don't say a bad word about the NHS because I adore it and they saved my life. So this is not a slight against the NHS. It's just factual. There are different things available privately.
Yeah. So like things like, so the NHS has strict guidelines as to what you can offer, and it has to go through various protocols to say it's worth spending the money to treat these people. But privately, you can often get access to things before they're rolled out, as different trials are available. And there are lots of people who can afford private healthcare who get access to these drugs or these new radiotherapy techniques. And it's not always obvious that I think people are often paying for them. And I think we should just be open and honest. You know, if I had private healthcare, I might use it to get access to a drug if my cancer came back. And I'll say, I am bloody lucky. But let's get everyone else to campaign to get this available on the NHS, because I want everybody to have it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just being open and honest and saying, this is what's happening. And again, I live in Suffolk. If you were to live in the middle of Suffolk, you may have to drive for 3 hours to get radiotherapy. There isn't the public transport that's available. If you don't live near the Manchester or London, you're not going to get the latest trials because every hospital can't do everything. It is such a postcode lottery.
It really is. And also in terms of, like, I've heard stories where people physically can't afford to pay for the transport to get them to their treatment.
No.
Cancer poverty is a real thing, and it's something, I guess people don't like talking about finances, fair enough, but I remember when I was going through chemo radiation and I was online and I was seeing people buying themselves chemo presents after they had chemo, and again, fair play, like if I had the money I probably would have.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's like the weight of the world already on your shoulders with the cancer.
Yeah.
And then there's this extra burden of like the constant worry about getting evicted, or how am I going to afford...
What's the point in living if I'm going to end up on the streets?
Yeah.
You know?
And like healthy foods and things like that, you know. I really changed my diet, not because I think diet gets rid of cancer, but because I wanted my body to have an easier ride as possible through this brutal treatment. So and healthy food and supplements are really expensive, and these are the things I think, gosh, everyone deserves access to all of this stuff. Everyone deserves that chance of that extra treatment. Everyone's life is as valuable as each other's, and it's quite hard to see. I'm a big fan of like cheering for the underdog, and I always wish I had more power to, you know, get people access to these things, or buy them supplements, or, you know, point them. I don't know. It's just such a huge issue, and it's, I mean, you can see it with your own eyes, can't you? Even on Instagram, the difference for different people.
It's really hard. I couldn't work for a year when I was having my chemo treatment, and I'd used up most of my sick pay when I was off with depression earlier. So I wasn't bringing any money in. And I'm lucky my husband has a job and we could afford to keep the house and everything going. But I was told I had to apply for benefits before my health insurance would kick in. And I had to go to the local job centre. I felt disgusting having to be there, analysed by a stranger to say, well, can you do this and can you do that? And no, you're not eligible for a grant. And I got an idea of what it's like on the other side of people having to go and almost beg someone to say, yes, you do deserve to have extra money. So many people have to give up their jobs, or they can't work after treatment because of the side effects. And you do often think, what is the point? I lost my job as a consultant. I can't work again having had this. Think, well, was it really worth it?
I know. For you as well, I think when you do a profession where you've had to train for such a long time and you've had to, you know, start at the bottom. I've seen that junior doctors get less than someone working in Costa. You know, I saw this fact and figure the other day. Like, you've had to go through all that, and really it's such a responsible, you've got people's lives in your hand. To lose that, I mean, I can't imagine. I feel sad that I can't teach anymore, but for you, and I just can't imagine how hard that is. And I was just about to say, because you mentioned depression, like, I found it really helpful and wonderful, you sharing that, your journey with depression, because I think that's something else that people are afraid to talk about in case they're seen as not being positive or grateful. And actually, I think any treatment that involves your hormones, I've really felt really I don't know if I want to be here. And I don't think I could say that to anyone. And so when you were talking about your journey with depression, like, I think it helped a lot of us feel seen. I had a bout of depression anyway, I would say. And I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about that because I'm here, because I am alive, and I am grateful to be here. And I kept really quiet about it, but it kind of chews you up inside. So it was freeing.
And I think part of it is you do an amazing job on social media, on Instagram, to raise awareness and to talk about this stuff. But when you are the face of bowel cancer, for example, I kind of face of breast cancer, I feel a responsibility to the people watching me. And you realise everything you show is, I'm happy and this is great. And I thought, this is bullshit, because I get bad days. And if I don't talk about it, people are going to think, God, I can't be like her. I think we have to be authentic role models. And for me, that was right. I need to talk about the depression and the reality. I had no idea as a cancer surgeon that you could get depression, anxiety, scanxiety, PTSD, even years down the line. And there is counselling help available if you need it. We need to look after people's mental health because it's a huge part of moving on.
And it's a huge part of cancer. And I think once you've had a cancer diagnosis, that's with you forever. There are certain things. I actually think the scanxiety is worse now, this far out of my operation. I'm like, surely it should be getting better.
I don't think it ever goes away. For me, I'll often have a worrying symptom and I think it's nothing. And then I'll see my GP and they'll say, I'll send you for a scan. I'm like, oh my God, they think it could be something. Now I'm really worried.
Yeah. So I have, at the moment, I'm being investigated. I've had a lump come up in my arm. And actually, because I followed your mum on Twitter and I know what she's gone through. So normally I would be like, oh, it's going to go down eventually. But after a few weeks, it hasn't. So, because your mum was so generous with her story, I thought, you know what, that's why people share their stories, not for us to sit at home going, oh, no, it'll go away. So, yeah, I've been put on like a pathway to have scans. And you know what, I'm not saying it is, but of course your mind goes to those places. And
it does.
I think part of it is the trauma that you go through. Cancer treatment, it's like you have to get down and dirty, don't you? You're like, it's so hard.
It is.
And you get through it and it's almost like, what just happened?
I know. But part of me thinks I haven't had breast cancer twice. It doesn't seem real. It hasn't happened to me. And then you look in the mirror and think, oh, yeah, it has. It's a real head fudge, as you said, isn't it?
Yeah. And do you know what? I think for me, I'm really used to seeing my scars now in my body and catheterizing, and I've got a stoma. But there are still times now, I've had a stoma for 4 years, and I've had my surgery 2.5 years ago. But even now, sometimes I'm like, how did this happen? How is this my life now when I'm changing bags of my own bodily fluids and my intestines, obviously, a part of my intestine is poking out of my body. And it's so bizarre. It feels like it's happened to someone else now, which might be a good thing.
That's it. It's that disconnect.
Yeah.
My head's up here and this body belongs to someone else, and we'll keep it that way.
Yeah. And it's funny, do you know what? Anyone listening who has gone through a surgery like mine or any kind of surgery for cancer, the best thing I can say is it's okay not to feel the same every single day. Like, there are days I feel great and I look down and I think, wow, I'm so proud of what my body's gone through. Like, it's unbelievable. When I tell people what I've had removed, they're like, and I feel proud of that. And then there might be days where I think I feel disappointed in myself because I don't feel like that. And I think we shouldn't make it harder for ourselves by being disappointed that we can't feel good all the time, because even without cancer, humans don't feel good every single day.
No.
I think releasing that pressure to feel good and grateful and proud of myself every single day, releasing that has been really freeing for me, because if I'm having a bad day, I allow it, I don't dwell on it, and then hopefully tomorrow will be better.
Because life happens. Like your dad's, he's got metastatic prostate cancer at the minute, hasn't he? And it's it's tough. I found it triggering when I was looking after mum, because it was almost, again, a reality of what might happen to me. And it's really, really hard when you've had cancer and your parents has got cancer and you don't want to interfere with what they're feeling, but you have your own knowledge.
The knowledge side of it's really hard, actually. And watching you go through it with your mum, and then obviously my dad getting his diagnosis, I don't know about you, but I feel more mentally unstable watching my dad go through it than I did with my own. I actually had a really quite a breakdown. I went to have my underneath of me examined. There was like a lump. So I literally had a meltdown, and even my CNS was like, I've never seen you like this before. You've just got on with it. And I told her, like, I actually think it's my dad's diagnosis. It's coming out now because I've been down with him, helping him. And I came back to London and I let myself be sad about it. And I think the knowledge it's a good thing in a way because we can help them. But knowing what lays ahead for them is really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I take it for him.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think you need a release. And that's where you do swimming, isn't it? I always see pictures of you in the sea.
I know, we need to go for a world swim.
We do.
I've been seeing it. I know it's a fad and everyone's on it, but I can see why, because, oh my gosh, the cold water swimming for me has been immense for my physical body and for my mental well-being as well. I'm so glad I found it because I'm really lucky. My hometown is by the sea, so when I go home to see my dad, I dip in, whether it's December or, summer or whatever. And I think finding that thing that is good for you, that you look forward to, and that even if you make yourself do it one day because you're not quite sure you want to be cold, you never regret it. No. And I didn't think, what's really good for me as well, it's like a sign of progress, is when I first had my operation and I looked down and I felt all sorts of stuff, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'll never want to show my body in public again. Like, I'll never wear a swimming costume. I have, like, my bottom obviously is kind of weird, but I have like a big Y shark. It looks like a shark's bitten my bottom cheek off.
But they could move the flap over.
Yeah, so they literally cut the glute and put it underneath. So it's like flat on one side. And I just remember thinking, there's no way I'm ever going on holiday again. I'll never wear a swimming costume, blah, blah, blah. And I really felt that at the time, and now I don't care.
No one is actually looking at us.
No, nobody cares. And also,
you realise that.
You know what? I didn't go through all of that to hide myself away.
And that's what I love about you.
I don't see people with bottoms like me, or with, I'm not represented in normal mainstream media. So why not be that person? Not that I want glory from it, but why not show it one other person that's gone through the surgery that you have, that actually, look at me.
Spark a conversation.
Yeah, I'm in the sea and it feels good.
Yeah. What happened to you?
Exactly. And I've had so many people contacted me saying, I had a pelvic accentration last year, and seeing you in the sea, I've just had my first sea swim. I'm like, oh my God, because it's such a big deal. You think you're never going to feel good or want to show. I mean, you've had your breasts removed, it's like noticeable.
Yeah. And I now go skinny dipping with my wild swimmers.
Yes.
And it's just so freeing. Nobody's watching. I think bodies aren't pretty.
Oh, that's so good.
And everyone's worried about how they look. And I don't bother shaving my legs anymore. I'm just in the water. I don't care. This is me. And if you don't want to look at me, you don't have to.
It's so liberating. And you know what, Liz, as well? Because when you've gone through what you've gone through, and this is for everyone who's gone through cancer and their body has changed, or their soul has changed, because it does, it changes you.
It really does.
You didn't go through all of this to sit in your home and feel sad because you poo in a bag, or you don't look like other people, or, you know what, there will be days where I don't feel as good as others, but on the whole, where I have this chance of another day and another day, etc., I get up and I make myself go and live, because I think you want to hide away sometimes. So yeah, and I think that's what's great about the community online, is that we do prop each other up, or you do see someone else doing something, or I saw someone with a bikini on with a bag, a stoma bag, and I was like, wow, they look amazing.
Yeah.
I think sharing is so powerful. It's not for everyone, but for me, like, there's so much power in that community, and like not feeling alone and like a monster.
I love that. It's just, there are no rules, and I think you just have to cope with cancer the only way you can. And for me, it was like, people say live every day as if it's your last, and that's exhausting, and it also means you're going to die. And the bins still need to go out and the dishwasher needs to be emptied. But I think just try and live your life as any normal person would. Accept the highs, accept the lows, and just don't take things for granted. Just enjoy what is out there and think you can hear the birds singing and you can see the bulbs coming up, and it's the little things that can make you smile.
Exactly that. It is the little things. I was just about to say, like, when you say, like, go out and make the most of your life and live your life, for me, life is all the little moments. It's not climbing a mountain, or, I mean, it can be if you want, but I think it's just noticing things and being present, and it's the little moments.
Or getting a hug from your dad.
Exactly. The time you spend with people. It doesn't have to be like adventure, and that can be living your life, but living your life can also be having a movie night on the sofa with popcorn and your dog and your partner, you know, stuff like that. And
just giggling and laughing and just switching off. It's escapism, isn't it?
Definitely. And like, it's just times that you think, oh my gosh, all these nights and months I spent in hospital, I was dreaming of these days, just the normal Monday, normal stuff, being at home and being surrounded by people that make you feel good. Like, you know what, that's been really great for me is I'm really much better with boundaries, and I'm who gets access to my energy. And I think that's one gift that cancer's given me, is like being really more self-aware, but aware of who I want to spend my time with and what I want to spend my time on. You know, I think that's a really big gift. Cancer is like, obviously it's a kind of weird one, but cancer has actually been my biggest teacher in my whole life. Yeah. It's taught me the most. I'm a much better person now. I wish I caught it earlier. That's all I can say. But there are some things that are just hideous and there's no polishing a turd, basically. But there are other things that I think, wow, I never would have done that if it wasn't for cancer. Or I never would have put boundaries down and respected myself. It's amazing. It is quite powerful, isn't it?
I'm a completely different person now than I was before, and it's made me look at who I am and what I'm capable of, and finally learning how to say no and just to do what's right for me. Because I think when, like you give on social media, you get an awful lot back, and it can be really hard to work out how to balance the stories you hear from people that can trigger you. And just having those boundaries to say, I don't know everyone in the world, but I will give them what I can when I can.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, learning to say no, it's really scary at first. You're like, it doesn't feel good.
No one's going to like me anymore, and they'll stop following me, and oh my goodness.
And actually, you know what? I don't know whether you find this, but the really hard to hear posts, you know, maybe like talking about depression, or for me, infertility, or, you know, the grief of I'll never go to toilet normally again. I always think, gosh, I never realised that was my last poo. Yes. That's really weird, but
it's not. It's not at all.
Those are the conversations that are like, it might not get the most likes. What does that mean? But I tell you what, those ones about infertility or struggling with a stoma, I get so many inbox messages from people saying, Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that's how I feel, and I felt wrong for feeling that. So you know what? I think it's important to sometimes have a conversation that you're like, I don't know whether I should say this. But actually it's authentic and it's really helpful to people.
It's why we do what we do. We share our stories so we can help other people. Natalie, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I can't. Before we go, I want to tell you about the Jar of Joy, which I'm going to get behind me. We have a Jar of Joy for the podcast where people send in things that have made them smile in the last week. This is it. What's made you smile in the last couple of days?
I think it's just something really simple. I went for a walk along the canal where we live, and the sun came out from behind the clouds, and it was just that moment of like, you know, it was really life affirming. I just breathed really deeply. The sun came out and there was like some swans on the canal. And I think it was just like, this is life. This is my life. And it's just like that life affirming moment. It wasn't anything major. So yeah, that was probably it.
I love that. That is definitely going in the jar. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for talking to us today. And we'll tell everyone how to get in touch with you in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Don't Ignore the Elephant. Natalie really is inspirational, although I'm sure she won't see it in herself. When I think of everything she's gone through and all she's lost because of her cancer diagnosis, and yet she still manages to find a positive outlook on life. We touched on some really important issues that are close to my heart. Cancer poverty is huge, when so many people have to stop working during treatment and worry about how they will pay the bills. And the postcode lottery is another, when your access to the latest treatments and trials is based on where you live, how close you are to a major cancer centre or a private hospital, or whether you can afford to travel to one. She also raised a really important issue about how lonely it can be when you have a rare cancer or have had an operation like Natalie's that is so rarely done. It's easy for me to find thousands of women with breast cancer online, but Natalie was lucky to find one woman who'd had her operation. And I know when Mum was diagnosed, we couldn't find anyone else who'd had their arm amputated at her age. What can we do to level the playing field? I'd love to know what you think. And I can't believe we've reached the end of season 2. I've loved talking to my guests about some really difficult topics. I've laughed and I've cried, I've been inspired and motivated, and your feedback and comments have reinforced that we need to keep getting these things out in the open. Let me know what elephants you want me to talk about in season 3 so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back in the autumn.